The story begins with demons roaming the earth and people running desperately for their lives. In the background, a voice speaks, "I have no talent. I've spent my entire life wielding a sword." We see more scenes of demons chasing civilians. "I've trained with the sword my whole life." We then see a mother and her child nearly being attacked by a demon, but someone saves them by completely slicing through the demon. But there was a peak I never reached. An enormous sword is seen, having just slain the demon, and its owner says, "Ah, these annoying guys. None of you demons will be spared." The pinnacle of swordsmanship, the Grandmaster of the Sword. We learn this man is Hyban, the Grandmaster of the Sword. As they approach, someone says, "Everyone get ready." Is this the Demon King's final troop? Hyban sees various types of heroes approaching, each with different classes, ready to confront the demon. The Archmage will handle the aerial attacks, while Lapinia and I will take care of those on the ground. The Archmage is a nameless figure, and beside him is another sword grandmaster named Lapinia. A bald, muscular old man called the King of Power, Voltas, also appears. There's a guy called Simply Warrior who says, "In the meantime, I'll infiltrate the Demon King's castle and try to negotiate his surrender." The voice continues, "Heroes made to defeat the Demon King." Hyban turns to another person in the battle, saying, "I'm counting on you to help the heroes discreetly with the chief's safety." He thinks, "My job is to guard the castle." This person, the Imperial Security Chief, helps the heroes from the shadows, appearing defeated and sad but unbothered. Hyban smiles at him and runs into combat, saying, "Let's grab a drink at the bar afterward." Lapinia is seen taking down many demons with her skill, while Voltas jumps in, causing explosions with his power. Meanwhile, the Archmage is performing a ritual that burns demons, leaving them no chance to react. Hyban is at the front line, fighting multiple demons. He activates a skill that turns his eyes black with red pupils, and he jumps high with his enormous sword, destroying many demons upon landing. In the castle, some demons try to invade, and a guard says, "Captain, it's a demon. Relax, I'll handle it." "Yes, Captain. This captain is strong, killing 2 demons with 1 strike." Sauter says, "Wow, amazing. He's that strong with just basic Imperial sword techniques? What are you looking at? Keep your guard up, Captain. Be careful." When he looks aside, a demon is already in his face. But the scene shifts to the Demon King's castle, where the Demon King says, "Warrior, this is your victory. This is my fate. So, take my head, humans. Enjoy the peace you've earned." The warrior then finishes the Demon King with his sword. Next, there's a grand celebration, with the heroes parading through the city and people throwing confetti. They did it. Finally. Long live the Empire. Voltas says, "It's a beautiful day, but I can't find the security chief." Hyban says, "He probably didn't die." Lapinia comments, "He's probably out there, immersed in his sword training or something." But he's in the background, thinking, "Heroes, you deserve the world's respect. My work was enough. I'm not a hero, nor am I the Grandmaster of the Sword." We then see a cabin in the snowy mountains, isolated. The protagonist, the security chief, is training there, thinking, "Maybe I don't have the natural talent for swordsmanship, but I love sword fighting. My whole life, I've wielded a sword, from my youth through my academy days with Hyban to my time in the Imperial Guard." Suddenly, he coughs up blood onto the snow. "Damn, I feel like I'm dying. If I had these wounds when I was young, maybe they'd have healed. Ah, my time has come, hasn't it? If only I were a hero like you, ageless and healthy. But, unfortunately, as time passes, I grow older and weaker. Should I wield my sword one last time?" He grabs his sword with all his remaining strength, unleashing an attack that becomes a pillar of light. He's amazed by it. This is the state of a human who's reached the sword's peak, the proof of a sword grandmaster. Facing this energy pillar, he realizes, "I've become a sword grandmaster. I never thought it would happen while I was still alive." He drops the sword and thinks, "But now that I've achieved it, what's the point? I'm an old man who's going to die soon anyway. It wasn't a bad life, becoming a sword grandmaster before dying." Suddenly, he opens his eyes, finding himself in a bed. What is this place? Is this the afterlife? Looking in the mirror, he sees he's much younger. Who is this? Where am I? He appears to be in a large, imperial city. I've reincarnated into this child's body? Ah, the castle, and the territory I served for years. Of all places to reincarnate, it had to be here? Well, setting that aside, I need to find out whose body I'm in. He stops to admire a woman training with a wooden sword. Sword training. She's a red-haired woman practicing. Who is she? The Lord's daughter? I don't remember any child like this in my past life. Noticing the sword technique, he says, "Ah, this technique, the snake-like movement. I know this technique. Wasn't it created by that guy? The technique is tough." She seems quite talented. The girl notices him and says, "Oh, you're awake, Asher? Are you just going to stand there while the others are already practicing?" "Asher. So my name is Asher. This is the Ravinia's sword technique, right? Judging by your skills, you must have practiced continuously for the last 4 or 5 years." She responds, "What? Anyway, your blade is still a bit unstable. Try relaxing your grip and slow down the cutting motion a bit." She throws the wooden sword at his head. "Hey, why are you talking so casually to me? Shouldn't you show a bit more respect to your employer? You should call me Lady Reka. Got it? Ah, sorry, Lady Reka." He thinks, so she's my employer, not my younger sister. "Anyway, Asher, didn't you get enough sleep today? You seem a bit out of it, you know? And for someone who's never wielded a sword, why did you suddenly come here anyway? How do you know about the hero's technique? Huh, how much do you know about this technique? I can take a look. If you don't do it right, you'll be in trouble. He thinks, damn, I've already messed up. I can't believe I was bold enough to try to teach the lady of this castle. But he boldly approaches the training dummy with the wooden sword. I guess my old habits of being very strict with my subordinate when I was a tactics chief are biting me now. Anyway, this feeling still has a good sense with the sword. Now I really feel alive. He immediately takes his stance to use his technique. Reika looks on, a bit confused. That's not the stance for the Imperial Sword technique. Where did you learn that? You seem more serious than usual. But our protagonist doesn't respond, blink, or even look at her. He's focused and wondering where I learned this. I've wielded a sword for 70 years, you little brat. I was holding a sword until my last breath. He performs a powerful vertical strike capable of cutting through anything. Reika is blown away by this. Anyway, having a young body like this is great. This body is light and full of energy. He continues to make several X-shaped cuts, not yet hitting the training dummy, just demonstrating his form. It feels like I can actually fly now. He runs towards the training dummy and, with a single diagonal slash, completely slices it apart, leaving Reika in complete shock. Incredible, Asher. He thinks, I can't seem to control myself when holding a sword. I should try not to cut everything around me. They see a crater in the ground. He's destroyed the entire courtyard. He walks towards Reika and says, I'm sorry. No way. Is that the Imperial Sword technique? It's the standardized sword style of the Empire. How did you, with such a basic and standardized technique, achieve that speed and level of destruction? But Asher isn't paying attention, and Reika says, Asher. She grabs his hand and says, that's so cool, Asher. She blushes as she speaks. Now that I've seen you use the sword, I realize you have great talent. Why were you hiding this skill all this time? Honestly, until now I thought you were just a useless idiot, but I was wrong. She says this with an adorable face, completely berating him. Our protagonists think, what kind of person is this lady? Thank you, ma'am. I only know a little. And she thinks, that's not true. He knows much more than just a little. On the other hand, he thinks, my face must be red now. Right, but thinking about it, why didn't you tell me this before? Okay, how did you say to do it slowly again? But our protagonist thinks, what is that sound? Suddenly, a man in fancy, decorated, military-like clothing arrives and says, Lady Reika, what were you doing with Asher just now? She responds, Brother Luke, and you, Asher, since you're awake, why haven't you gone outside to chop wood or do something useful? How dare you speak to someone from my family so boldly? You better remember, you piece of trash, you're just a commoner and we are nobles. I'm sorry, young Master Luke. And our protagonists think, for heaven's sake, I've found the rude young master, haven't I? Anyway, why are you holding Reika's sword? Do you intend to learn our noble technique? Reika starts to explain, no, brother, it's not that. Be quiet, Reika. Anyway, I think this is the perfect moment. I've been needing a sparring partner. If you last at least a minute against me, Asher, I'll acknowledge your skills. Let's put you to the test. Reika, obviously scared, says, no, brother, stop it. Don't worry, Reika, I won't kill him. She thinks to herself, actually, I don't think that's it. I'm not sure you can kill him, actually. Meanwhile, the protagonist is very nervous. Not sure if it's because he's about to fight a noble or because he's gotten into trouble with a noble, but in reality, he's nervous with anger, so to speak. He says, wow, this guy's stance is not correct at all for a basic sword fight. What a crazy brat. How can a lady like that have such a dishonorable brother? From our protagonist's perspective, it makes sense because he was a very honorable warrior in his past life. Still seeing it from the perspective of someone who knows what they're talking about, he thinks, look at this idiot trying to fight with a sword. Look at this idiot with that lousy stance. He thinks, I should probably take him down as soon as possible to avoid more trouble. Prepare yourself, Asher. Luke charges at our protagonist, who's in the correct stance, but the next moment, all we see is Luke's sword spinning in the air and landing next to his foot. Our protagonist thinks, it wasn't that easy to lose on purpose, you know? So I guess I ended up winning, right? Additionally, we see blood dripping at Luke's feet. He has a small cut on his face that's bleeding, and the protagonist thinks, my god, what have I done? Luke simply touches the blood on his face, and in a mix of disgust and fear, lets out a scream so loud it's heard across the kingdom. The protagonist thinks, I can't believe a mere servant ended up injuring his own master. Meanwhile, at Lord Arak's castle, we hear Luke saying, please, punish Asher severely. A servant like him dared to injure his own master. We see the Lord and his wife sitting, witnessing all this. To my surprise, the noble heir of the Arak family can no longer tolerate Asher's actions, which bring disgrace. The Lord simply says, Asher, yes, Lord, is what Luke said true? The protagonist think, Leborok, you became a lord 40 years ago in my past life. Back when I was being considered for the next guard captain, I remember him visiting the guard. So it seems 20 years have passed since I died. Heir, we have treated you like our own child all this time. Despite all the mistakes you've made, we allowed you to stay in the castle as our servant, but this time you crossed the line. You deserve severe punishment, but considering the affection we have for you, we will be lenient. Leave our territory immediately. The queen, already alarmed, says, dear, think carefully. Be quiet, woman. We've tolerated him for your sake, but I cannot forgive this. The queen queen is inconsolable, very sad for Asher. Can we continue to show affection for this ungrateful child who doesn't recognize the grace he has? You're lucky you're just being expelled with your health intact. But Reika doesn't let it slide and steps in. She says, no, my brother is the one at fault. Asher did nothing wrong, let him go now. She continues assertively, he hurt himself with his own sword while trying to hit Asher. Asher was only teaching me a sword technique. My brother is a terrible swordsman, a disgrace to our nobility. Luke grits his teeth. Ah, you wretch. Reika's words really catch the attention of the Lord and his wife. Asher teaching you sword techniques? This is the first I'm hearing of it. Reika, is that true? Actually, Asher has a high level of the imperial technique. And to extend our conversation, that's why I want him as my mentor. Asher has changed, father. He's now sincerely committed to training. Luke laughs at this. You want to learn sword techniques from Asher, who has barely held a sword in his life. And not just that, but also the imperial technique? Oh, give me a break, Reika. What's wrong with your head? But Reika stands firm. I witnessed Asher's technique with my own eyes. If you don't believe it, let him demonstrate his skills directly. Meanwhile, the Lord thinks to himself, I have no idea what's going on here. Karen, says the Lord, test Asher's abilities. The queen is alarmed. Dear, I think Karen is a bit too much for him. Don't worry, it's merely an evaluation. Meanwhile, the Lord thinks, Asher, I don't know what trick you used to suddenly know how to use a sword and to enchant my daughter like this. But if it's true, I'll make you crawl out of this castle nearly dead. Our protagonist thinks, this is getting out of hand. Grab your sword, Asher. If you last more than 5 minutes against Karen, I'll acknowledge your skills. We see the two of them standing face to face in front of the Lord, both in combat stance. Meanwhile, Karen thinks, ah, Asher, you dared to try and teach Lady Reika? You are truly insolent. In front of Lord Arak, I have no intention of going easy on you. I'll end your lineage and drive you out of this territory. Here I come, Asher. And he rushes toward our protagonist, who is still somewhat nervous, unsure of what to do in this situation. But somehow, he manages to cross swords with Karen. Reika thinks, if what I saw is right, you can definitely fight against Karen. Meanwhile, in the fight, Karen says, you're trembling, Asher. Do you think being a swordsman is easy? Let me teach you a lesson. He tries to make a diagonal cut to catch our protagonist with great force, but Asher manages to defend against this attack. Karen thinks, ah, you haven't even mastered the basics of the sword. Talking about being an insolent swordsman, he goes very offensively at Asher, using various powerful techniques, but Asher remains on the defensive, managing to fend off the attack, though still a bit nervous about the situation. Karen thinks, ah, you are still weak, you arrogant fool. How dare you tarnish the name of swordsman? But our protagonist, with an unwavering expression, continues to hold his ground. The Lord says, I think facing Karen is too much for him. Reika thinks, no, this isn't right. Luke says, ah, good, Karen. As expected from the top disciple of the Imperial Academy, you really deserve to be the commander of the elite swordsmen. There's no way Asher can beat Karen, one of the best in the Empire. But Asher just gives a slight smile, and just because the protagonist is bent down, Karen thinks, huh, so weak and pathetic. Remember well this difference between you and me. He feels all proud for having defeated Asher. See what a real swordsman looks like. Then our protagonist, Asher, starts to get up and says, Karen, that was a cute performance, quite adorable to watch. But are you really elite, Karen? Karen gets nervous at this. What are you talking about? And Asher responds, I'll remind you of what you just said. Do you really think the position of commander of the knights is not to be taken seriously? Now, I'll teach you a lesson. He performs the same vertical strike from a few scenes before, easily knocking Karen down. Karen is thrown back and hits one of the castle's pillars. Everyone is shocked by this, even the lords. Karen thinks, what was that? I barely managed to block it. How pathetic. Get up and grab your sword like a good elite soldier. Asher thinks, it's because of this era of peace, without demons or wars, that many weak men were created. They need to be corrected. They need to learn military discipline. We see a very imposing scene of our protagonist standing over Karen. That's it, Karen. You, the head of an empire, the leader of the Templars of this territory, will fall to the hands of a civilian. This makes Karen furious. You bastard. He grabs his sword again and charges, saying, how can a civilian defeat me? He tries to make a diagonal strike like Asher's, but our protagonist easily dodges it without even needing to block with his sword. He just says, too slow, and then prepares a powerful punch, hitting Karen's head. Everyone is astonished by what just happened because it wasn't just a punch. A powerful energy emanated around Asher, cracking the ground and destroying the floor. When the attack ends, Karen is lying on the ground, unable to get up. He thinks, what a disgrace, Karen. Indeed, I sound like an old grump talking about the old days. In my time, not only was a commander better than you, but any of the soldiers I trained was incomparably better than you. Countless rigorously trained soldiers, hundreds, even thousands of them super trained, couldn't do anything against the demons. We see a scene of him on the battlefield, seeing all the soldiers dead. Now we are in an era without wars or demons. There must always be a firm hand. We must never be weak like this. Suddenly, several other guards surround Asher, and the Lord rises, looking furious. He demands, who are you? You are not the Asher we know. Who are you? Answer immediately. Asher thinks, doubt, fear. What should I say to make you believe what I'm about to say? He simply responds, I lost my memory. Lost your memory? Yes. I woke up this morning and couldn't remember anything. I don't know who I was or who you are. All that remains in my mind is my skill with the sword. I thought using a sword might help me regain my memories, but I still feel this emptiness inside. He drops the sword on the ground and says, anyway, I just injured the chief. Then he kneels on the ground and says, I will accept my punishment. Everyone is silent, not saying anything for a while. Later, in the same castle, our protagonist is in one of the towers, which seems to be his room. He says, I need time to organize my thought. Until then, I won't leave my room. But he notices that the sword is still with him. Meanwhile, Reika is bringing him a snack and thinks, Asher has changed so much. It's like he's become a completely different person. She thinks, until yesterday he wasn't like this. He had never held a sword before and behaved in a very vulgar manner. In short, the kid was a pain. Asher was my mother's adopted son before Luke and I were born. She found Asher abandoned outside the castle. At the time, she was very sad and depressed about not having any children, so she raised Asher as if he were her own son, without any help from the maids. Since Reika and Luke were born, Asher and Reika were like family, but as time went on, the relationship deteriorated more and more. Obviously, Asher was the mother's favorite, who showed a lot of love and obsession for him. Thanks to the mother's effort, he grew up separately, and his behavior was causing so many problems that he was almost expelled from the castle. But thanks to the mother's efforts, he was able to stay in the castle on the condition that he worked as a servant. Obviously, Reika was very sad about the whole situation and thought he was a very pathetic child. But suddenly, he just changed completely. The way he speaks, his behavior, personality, everything changed. It's like he's a grandmaster of the sword who trained for years to reach this level. She knocks on Asher's door and says, It's me. Ah, I brought you some food. She opens the door and asks, are you still there? When she realizes what's happening, she sees Asher pointing a wooden sword at her with a very frightened look. She asks, is that it? And ends up dropping all the plates, cups, and food, falling to the ground in fear. Asher says, Miss Reika, I'm sorry. I saw there was a sword here, so I decided to train a bit. She responds, sword training? Still on the ground, very scared. Later that night, we see Reika sitting on the bed, watching Asher train. She thinks, wow, he's really obsessed with this sword thing. He's like a fanatic. Asher says, Miss Reika? Yes. She was lost in thought and came back to reality. He asks, what kind of person was I before? Well, judging by the behavior of Luke and the Lord, I guess I wasn't very favorable to them, right? She gets nervous and replies, you weren't a good child. Except for my mother, no one in the castle family like you. You caused problems, destroyed and invaded property, that and much more is what you did around the city. Our protagonist thinks, yeah, I guess I crossed the line. Asher, do you remember your master's face? So, why are you talking so calmly with me, Reika? She responds, why would I despise you? Because you lost your memories? Honestly, that's none of my business. If things are changing for the better, I won't think much about it. Anyway, you've had a great improvement in behavior, so please take good care of me. He also gets lost in thought and thinks, no disdain, no indifference. Suddenly, someone at the door says, it's okay, I'm coming in. We see it's Lady Benicia. Asher thinks, it's Lord Lebroc's wife. What's her name again? Benicia, right? He kneels in front of her and says, Lady Benicia, to what do I owe this pleasure? She gently touches his face and says, you don't need to be so formal with me. Putting aside what happened, I raised you. Speak as you always have. Call me mother. She thinks, right, he lost his memories. How will he remember that I'm his mother? He says, the Asher you know is no longer me. I'm not a child anymore. And Benicia thinks, it's true, he isn't the Asher I know. He continues, your face, your name, everything. I forgot everything. To me, you're a stranger. She simply hugs him and says, I was the one who found you when I was in my 20s. I hadn't yet produced an heir. In those days, I was full of guilt and doubts about myself, insecurities, and I found you abandoned outside the castle walls. When I held you in my arms and saw your smile, my world completely changed. Even with others opposing, I raised you with much love and care. Even if you consider me a stranger, it's okay, because you are my child. I raised you with love as if you were my own son. Our protagonist thinks to himself, in this body, Asher, can I start over and become someone real for her to be so indifferent and unconcerned with me? The real Asher was nothing to you, right? That's kind of sad. But he says, I understand, mother. Meanwhile, in the Lord's office, someone says, demon? And Karen responds, no, definitely not. The Lord says, no, that is a very hasty decision. Demons disappeared a long time ago. Even if there were a demon somewhere, there's no way it's connected to Asher. If there is a demon around here, it is probably infiltrated where the lords and nobles are. There's no reason to choose the body of someone as common as him. But for a child to defeat an elite soldier like Karen, we see Karen all battered, silent after hearing this. Not to mention that someone as exceptionally talented as Reika is following in his footsteps. Suddenly, someone says, you're having an interesting conversation. When they look to the side, there's a man sitting on the windowsill, wearing armor and holding a large sword. The Lord asks, who are you? Karen charges with his sword, thinking the man won't react. But when he's about to strike, the man simply catches the sword with 2 fingers and says, you're not that bad. Seems like a solid skill. You'd make a good squire. The lord is shocked, and the man casually says, "Ah, Leborok," and throws Karen away. Luke, known for being a coward, is terrified. Karen is getting beaten again, unsurprisingly. He thinks, damn, here I am again. The warrior who entered through the window says, what a shame. If you were a bit younger, you might even put up a fight. Isn't that right, Leborok? Nervously, Leborok responds, anyway, he is my knight. You're overstepping a bit. When Karen realizes who it is, he is ecstatic, and the lord starts to welcome him more warmly. It's been 20 years. Welcome to my home, the one who reached the pinnacle of the sword. Hiban, where have you been, your majesty? It's been 20 years. I thought you were dead. The others kneel out of respect. Hiban simply says, I had something to investigate. I traveled to the end of the continent, to the horizon of this world. We see a scene with dragons flying in the sky, a storm raging, and even a sinister face in the clouds. But I still haven't discovered everything I needed to. Anyway, a child defeated the knight who guards Leborok? Karen, thoroughly embarrassed, responds, yes. And the lord says, anyway, it was a very ordinary person who had never properly held a sword. Must be someone with a lot of talent. So, tell me more. The next morning, very early, Asher and Reiko were already training. He says, come, hit me with all your strength. Ah, is it really okay if I do that, Asher? You don't even have a sword in your hand. This training isn't about the sword, it's training for real combat. Before you draw your sword, let me demonstrate. Attack me with the intent to stab this sword into my chest. He thinks, for someone who barely managed to stay in the castle, Lady Reika asked to be my disciple. I refused because of our status difference, but her determination was enough to change my mind. We see Reika trembling but attacking and trying to hit Asher, who dodges with small steps. He thinks she's using heroic fencing. Certainly has talent and decent skills, but she's still weak. He firmly grabs her wrist and throws her to the side. Her movements are straight out of a book. When she hits the wall, she gets all banged up, but Asher helps her up. My lady, you are strong, but this is the maximum a swordsman can reach. Real combat is a completely different story. He thinks, what are the chances of only talented people surviving on the battlefield? I've seen many people on the battlefield die because they overestimated themselves. Before becoming a swordsman, Lady Reika, you need to train your body and mind. She asks, who are you? Huh, it's like you have war experience. He responds, I'm just giving you a bit of common sense to understand that fencing and real combat are very different. He says this while twisting her arm. What you're doing now is not fencing. You must abandon your faith in fencing. Just having sword skills won't save you in real combat. What you need now, my lady, is to apply fencing and control your emotion. You must never lose your cool and composure in front of an opponent. You need a calm mind to swing your sword as you wish and overpower enemies with your strength. Sitting, watching his attack, Reika thinks, I can't find any gap or mistake in this attack. He says, I'll teach you combat technique that apply in real life. Good, Asher. Then let's train properly now. They trained until the sun set. Reika, very tired, says, I think I'm going to collapse soon. Asher, that guy doesn't know the meaning of moderation. No matter what he does, I put in so much effort and he hasn't lost one. How much energy does he have? But I feel like I've gotten stronger in just one day. Suddenly, Luke appears, calling for Reika. Were you playing with that guy, Asher? Playing? I was training, my foot. You're going to start training like a man now. Think whatever you want. Watch your manners, little sister. You're embarrassing the dignity of a noble. You're a noble, and he's just a commoner. Nobles must only show generosity to them, not learn something from them. Reika draws her sword and points it at Luke, who is scared to death. Can you shut up, please? Are you actually going to hit me? Me, the heir of the Lord? If you hit me, it won't end well for you. I really don't care. A daughter trying to hit the eldest son? That's quite rare to see, indeed. I apologize for showing such behavior from my children. Reika, I let Asher off the hook, but don't hurt Luke more than that. Ah, yes, father, I'm sorry. She thinks, but aside from that, who is this man? Is he my uncle? What an interesting family. She thinks, there's something extraordinary about him. Luke bows and says, Grandmaster Hiban. She thinks, a Grandmaster of the Sword here? I am Luke Halvard, the heir to the great Halvard family. And Reika thinks, I truly follow the pinnacle of the sword, respected by position and rank. There are only 10 of these superhumans throughout the empire. As a swordsman, I have always greatly admired your work and heroic deeds, Lord Hiban. I would like to become your disciple. And he thinks, huh, Reika talking about masters and rankings, I'll be far ahead of you. Only a sword master can teach me. But Hiban simply ignores Luke. He's very mysterious. He goes to Reika and says, ah, child, pleasure to meet you. And he thinks, huh, this is below my expectations. She doesn't feel any intimidation, even in front of me, and is ready to attack. Should I test her? He draws his sword, so heavy that it creates a gust of wind, and everyone panicked when he does this. But Reika just stares at him. A Grandmaster of the Sword, this old man? She recalls what she was learning from Asher. Don't be intimidated by your enemy's aura. The moment you draw your sword with fear, you are already defeated. Maintaining composure in front of the enemy is crucial. We see that Hiban has an impressive aura, but Reika continues to stare at him confidently. Hiban actually attacks, and she manages to defend herself immediately. Huh, quite impressive, he thinks. She's the first young person I've seen who doesn't run away from me when I approach. Normally, Finally, they fall over in fear because of my presence, or they can't handle even a light tap from my sword. And this girl managed to hold off my large sword with that little stick. She's struggling to hold his attack. It seems she has a lot of potential to be a warrior. He weakens his attack slightly, and she manages to disarm him. Instead of getting angry, he smiles at her, but she keeps attacking, and he thinks the same thing as our protagonist, a fencing style where you move like a snake. Is this the Ravinia technique? But Hyban easily defends against all her attacks, still smiling. He says, "Impressive, child." Then, he simply throws her away, and her sword falls from her hand. Hyban manages to pin Reiko with his sword. "Ah, Lord Hyban, please stop. Lord Leberok, unlike your cowardly son, you have a very competent and courageous daughter. So, is this child your disciple?" When he turns back to Reika and speaks to her, she sees an opening and kicks him, managing to retrieve her sword. But he is already behind her and places his hand on her head. "You even counterattacked me while I was distracted. Impressive." She thinks, "When did you get there?" He says, "In time. You could even rival Ravinia, you know? Can you please take me to your master?" She responds, "Ah, sure." And she thinks, he's not a normal man. Inside the carriage, she thinks, he countered my strongest attack like it was child's play, and my father is being so cautious around him. "Your name is Reika, right?" "Ah, yes, sir." "Ah, this friend of yours, how do you feel watching this child practice?" "Ah, I feel like he's a veteran with the sword." Calling an 18-year-old a veteran. "Anyway, it's been a long time since I passed through this training field. I once had a duel here with an old friend of mine." The Lord asks, "Ah, and how is your friend?" "He was a good man, but he is no longer with us." "Ah, my condolences." "Ah, it's okay. It was 20 years ago." We see Asher training with his sword, and Reika approaches to get his attention. When he looks, he is shocked to see who is there and thinks to himself, "Hyban, what are you doing here?" "It's good to see you, child. But now that I think about it, Hyban was once Leberok guardian when Leberok was still young. During the tenure of the previous lord, I specifically sought out Hyban to look after him." Asher is nervous and says, "Master of the sword, Hyban. Ah, do you know me? I've been waiting so long to meet you, you know?" He gives a little smile and thinks, "Here we go again with this habit of mine." And Asher thinks, testing the skills of the younger ones, Hyban? Anyway, it's been a long time, hasn't it?" But the moment Hyban draws his sword, Asher immediately disarms him. As Hyban's sword falls, he just looks at the scene, very ecstatic. Hyban remembers when he was still training with Asher in another life, and Asher said, "This imperial technique here is only for self-defense. It's nothing compared to you, Hyban." "No, it's not like that. We just took different paths. But you've reached another level." Hyban gets up and stretches. "How about we have a match? For old time's sake?" "Sounds good." The moment they cross swords, Hyban sees that familiar look Asher had and recognizes it in him. When he realizes this, he is very scared, and Hyban says, "Captain of the guard." Asher is very frightened that he recognized him. And that's it for today, folks. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and activate the notification bell. Anyone who comments discipline them will get a heart. Thank you so much for following along, and see you next time. Bye!